Commander Jessica Miller stood at attention on the bridge of the U.S. Tenacity, maintaining a carefully neutral expression as three Zarkax inspectors chittered and laughed among themselves. Their crystalline exoskeletons caught the dim light of the bridge's malfunctioning overhead panels, casting dancing patterns across the worn deck plating. "Remarkable," the lead inspector said, mandibles clicking in what Miller had learned was their species' equivalent of patronizing amusement. To think they actually achieved faster-than-light travel with such primitive methodologies. Miller felt her jaw tighten, but kept her diplomatic smile firmly in place. Around her, her crew maintained their own masks of humble deference. Lieutenant Ryan Jackson, her chief engineer, had even added a slight tremor to his hands as he held out the ship's outdated technical specifications on a scratched tablet. The deception went far deeper than appearances. Beneath their feet, separated by layers of holographic camouflage and quantum shielding, the Tenacity's true heart beat with power that would have made the smirking aliens choke on their condescension. The rust patches along the corridors concealed metamaterial sensors more advanced than anything in the Zarkax fleet. The radiation leaks they detected were carefully crafted quantum signatures designed to mask the ship's real capabilities. "Tell me, Commander." The lead inspector turned to her, his crystalline head tilting in what she recognized as barely concealed disdain. "How do you manage with such limited computing power? Your ship's core seems barely capable of calculating basic navigational plots." Miller allowed a flicker of practiced embarrassment to cross her face. "We make do, Your Excellency. Human ingenuity compensates for our technological limitations." The aliens burst into another round of chittering laughter. "Ingenuity. Yes, you humans certainly are. Resourceful." The word dripped with mockery. "Perhaps in a few centuries, you'll develop something approaching real spacefaring capability." A warning light flickered on Miller's neural link, hidden beneath a decorative collar pin. Dr. Amanda Foster, her quantum systems specialist, was signaling from below decks. The aliens' presence was providing an excellent opportunity to map more of their bioelectric signatures. "Your Excellency," Miller said, bowing slightly, "would you care to inspect our engineering section? I know it's hardly worth your valuable time, but protocol insists." "Oh, yes." The lead inspector practically bounced with malicious glee. "I've heard stories about your nuclear propulsion. Simply fascinating, like watching children playing with blocks." As they led the inspection team toward engineering, Miller caught Lieutenant Jackson's eye. He gave an imperceptible nod. The passive scanners were recording everything. Every dismissive comment, every arrogant gesture, every piece of supposedly encrypted data flowing through the aliens' personal devices. It was all being cataloged and analyzed by systems that shouldn't exist for another 50 years, according to their official technological timeline. The inspection lasted another 3 hours. By the end, the Zarkax were practically glowing with self-satisfaction, convinced they'd confirmed humanity's technological inferiority. As their shuttle departed, Miller watched from the observation deck as it disappeared into the massive bulk of their capital ship. Only then did she allow herself a small, fierce smile. Her neural link chimed with an encrypted message. "Operation Wooden Horse is now active. Maintain deception protocols. Continue gathering intelligence on Imperial Defense Networks. Authorization code. Odysseus Prime." Miller sent back a single acknowledgement ping. Around her, hidden beneath layers of holographic rust and fabricated deterioration, the U.S. Tenacity hummed with lethal possibility. Let them laugh. Let them mock. Let them believe their own propaganda about humanity's limitations. They would learn, far too late, that underestimating humanity was the last mistake their empire would ever make. "All hands," she subvocalized through her neural link. "Maintain Phase 1 protocols. Let's give them exactly what they expect to see. Nothing more, nothing less." The Tenacity continued its orbit, looking for all the world like exactly what the Zarkax believed it to be, a barely functional relic of a primitive species. Its true nature, like humanity's real capabilities, remained hidden behind the greatest camouflage ever devised, an enemy's own prejudice. Reactor efficiency down 12%. Lieutenant Ryan Jackson shouted across the bustling Imperial spaceport, his voice carrying just far enough to reach the nearby Zarkax merchants. Commander Miller, we can't maintain orbit like this. Commander Miller suppressed a smile as she played her part. Just get it working, Lieutenant. I don't care if you have to replicate spare parts using stone knives and bearskins. The gathered aliens chittered in amusement, their crystalline forms reflecting the harsh port lighting. One of them, a maintenance supervisor, approached with the peculiar swaying motion that indicated barely contained mirth. Perhaps, the supervisor offered, mandibles clicking, we could spare some of our outdated components. They would still be centuries ahead of your current systems. That's very kind, Miller replied, mastering the art of looking both grateful and embarrassed. But our budget barely covers standard maintenance as it is. Below decks, the real work continued. Dr. Amanda Foster monitored the quantum scanning array, disguised as a series of coolant leaks, as it mapped the port's security protocols. Every condescending offer of help, every dismissive inspection, brought more of the Empire's communication channels within their grasp. They're not even bothering to encrypt the command frequencies anymore, Foster reported through their neural link. According to these readings, they've actually downgraded security protocols in human-occupied spaces. Miller kept her expression neutral as she continued arguing with Jackson about their failing systems. The Zarkax's contempt was becoming their greatest ally. Their certainty that humans couldn't possibly understand their technology meant they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. The U.S. tenacity had become a regular fixture at Imperial outposts, its reputation spreading through the Zarkax networks as the perfect example of human technological backwardness. They'd even started using it in their educational programs, teaching young Zarkax about the charming primitives who somehow managed spaceflight with such inferior technology. Commander, Jackson called out, this time through their secure channel. You need to see this. They're running a complete diagnostic on their quantum defense grid. Right here, right now, completely unshielded. Because why shield it from primitive humans who can barely manage fusion power? Miller subvocalized, making her way to engineering through corridors that looked increasingly decrepit with each passing week. The holographic camouflage was learning, adapting, making their deception more convincing by the day. In engineering, hidden behind false walls and illusory radiation warnings, the Tenacity's true systems hummed with quiet power. The quantum core, masked as an outdated fusion reactor, processed more data in a second than the Zarkax believed possible for any human system. Look at this, Jackson pointed to a holographic display that appeared to be a malfunctioning maintenance screen to any outside observers. Their entire defense network operates on quantum-entangled pathways, heavily encrypted, incredibly advanced. But they're transmitting the protocols in the clear because we're not supposed to be able to detect them. Miller finished. Keep recording. Every scrap of data, every frequency, every pathway. Through the viewport, Miller watched a Zarkax battlecruiser dock, its crystalline hull gleaming with power and pride. The alien crew would never imagine that the decrepit human vessel nearby was mapping their every system, their every weakness. New orders from command, Foster announced quietly. They want us to start testing the response protocols, see how their automated defenses react to various stimuli. Miller nodded. Begin the next phase. Lieutenant Jackson, I believe it's time for another catastrophic system failure. Something dramatic enough to draw their attention, but not serious enough to warrant replacement. Commander, I'm thinking a plasma conduit rupture. Lots of visible venting, minimal actual damage. Perfect. Let's give them another show. Remember, everyone, we're not just playing a part. We're giving them exactly what they expect, what they want to see. Their prejudice is our perfect camouflage. As the false alarms began to sound, and the carefully controlled plasma venting created a spectacular light show, Miller allowed herself a moment of grim satisfaction. The Zarkax rushed to assist the struggling human vessel, never suspecting that each helpful diagnostic, each patronizing inspection, brought their empire one step closer to its downfall. Michael Thompson hadn't slept in 36 hours. The data analyst's quarters aboard the U.S. Tenacity were littered with holographic displays, each showing different aspects of the Zarkax communication patterns he'd been studying. Something was there, just at the edge of perception, like a word on the tip of his tongue. "You're going to burn out your neural implants if you keep this up," Dr. Amanda Foster said, appearing at his doorway with a steaming cup of coffee. "Look at this," Thompson said, gesturing at the central display. Every transmission, every quantum pulse, every single piece of data flowing through their network. There's a pattern here. It's not random static. Foster set down the coffee and studied the scrolling data. Her eyes widened. "That's impossible. They're not just synchronized. They're beating," Thompson finished. "The entire defense network pulses like a heartbeat, one massive interconnected system." He manipulated the holographic display, highlighting specific frequency patterns. To any Zarkax observers, the room would appear to be filled with malfunctioning environmental controls and flickering lights. Just another example of human technological inadequacy. Every 3.7 seconds, their entire network syncs up. Everything. Weapons, shields, communications, navigation. It's all connected through these quantum channels. Thompson's hands danced through the air, pulling data streams apart. "And look at this, buried in the carrier wave." Foster leaned closer, her expression darkening. "Is that what I think it is?" Code fragments. They've been subtly interfering with human technological development for years. Little nudges here and there, making sure we develop along the paths they expect, keeping us properly inferior. Commander Miller's voice came through their neural link. "Report to the war room." Now, the war room was officially listed as Secondary Storage Bay C in the ship's outdated schematics. Behind its seemingly rusted doors lay the true heart of the Tenacity's intelligence operation. Miller was waiting with Lieutenant Jackson when they arrived. "Show me," Miller ordered without preamble. Thompson projected the data into the secure holotank. The Zarkax defense grid isn't just a network. It's a single organism. Every ship, every station, every weapons platform. They all sync to this central pulse. It's elegant, efficient, and their greatest weakness. Jackson finished, his engineering mindset immediately grasping the implications. "If we can disrupt that sync, we can take down their entire empire in seconds," Foster breathed. "But the processing power required to analyze and counter these quantum frequencies would be..." Miller's expression was grim. "Show them the rest." Thompson highlighted the buried code fragments. "They'd been playing us from the start. These are subtle technological manipulations, hidden in background radiation. They've been nudging human development, making sure we stay on a predictable path." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Zarkax hadn't just been mocking humanity. They'd been actively working to keep humans contained, controlled, developing along lines they could easily predict and counter. "Can we use this?" Miller asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. Thompson nodded. "Their synchronization is perfect, which means it's perfectly predictable. If we can insert our own signal into that pulse." He paused, running calculations. "We'd need to precisely match their quantum frequency, accounting for temporal distortion. And..." "We can do it," Foster interrupted. "The Tenacity's quantum core is more than capable. We just need time to develop the right viral package." Miller studied the pulsing data streams, watching the heartbeat of an empire that had made the mistake of underestimating humanity. How long? A week to crack their frequency patterns completely. Another 2 to develop a virus that can propagate through their network. Thompson's eyes were bright with possibility. They'll never see it coming. Their own arrogance means they don't even scan for threats from primitive human vessels. "Begin immediately." Miller ordered. "And everyone, this doesn't leave this room. As far as the Empire is concerned, we're still struggling to maintain basic life support." As they dispersed, Thompson caught one last glimpse of the pulsing network data, the heartbeat of an empire, beating in perfect, predictable synchronization. Soon that heart would skip a beat, and the Empire would learn too late that they should have looked more closely at the primitive vessel they'd dismissed as harmless. Commander Miller watched through the Tenacity's viewport as another human colony ship was escorted into Zarkak space. The Empire's cultural integration program was accelerating, their euphemism for systematic conquest growing more transparent by the day. "Reactor malfunction sequence ready, Commander," Lieutenant Jackson reported through their neural link. Today's performance needed to be their most convincing yet. "Begin on my mark," Miller subvocalized. She waited until the Zarkak's engineering inspection team was nearly at the airlock. Now, the Tenacity's outer hull erupted in a spectacular display of venting plasma and emergency lighting. Warning klaxons blared as Jackson's carefully orchestrated chaos began. Right on cue, Dr. Foster's team started their hidden work, using the radiation leaks as cover for their deepest scan yet of the Imperial network. The Zarkak's response was immediate and predictably condescending. Their emergency teams rushed aboard, crystal exoskeletons gleaming under the flashing warning lights. "Oh, you poor primitives," the lead engineer chittered, mandibles clicking in barely contained amusement. "Using nuclear fusion for main power. It's like watching children play with fire." Miller performed her role perfectly, mixing embarrassment with gratitude. "We're thankful for any assistance, Overseer. Our understanding of plasma containment is limited." The alien's crystalline head tilted, and what she'd learned was their expression of smug superiority. "Allow us to demonstrate proper plasma handling techniques. Your species might learn something basic." Behind her carefully maintained mask of humility, Miller watched as the Zarkak's engineers began their work. Every scan they performed, every diagnostic tool they used, fed more data into the Tenacity's hidden quantum processors. Michael Thompson's voice whispered through her neural link. "Commander, you need to see this. Their diagnostic tools just gave us access to their tertiary command protocols." "Maintain position," she subvocalized. "Let them finish their demonstration." The Zarkak spent 3 hours fixing the manufactured reactor problem, each moment feeding more intelligence into the Tenacity's databanks. Dr. Foster's virus, nicknamed Odysseus, grew more sophisticated with every bit of information gathered. Later, in the secure war room, Thompson displayed their findings. "They're not just mapping our technology anymore. They're actively suppressing human innovation. Look at these signal patterns." The holographic display showed waves of subtle quantum interference, designed to disrupt any human technology that strayed too far from the Zarkak's approved development path. "Clever bastards," Jackson muttered, studying the data. "They're using our own power grids to distribute the suppression field. Every time we plug into their network for approved power sharing, we're helping them keep us down." Foster finished. "But there's something else. Show them, Michael." Thompson highlighted a new data stream. "This is from their engineering team's diagnostic tools. See these command protocols? They're not just monitoring us. They're preparing for something bigger." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. The Zarkaks weren't playing a long game of technological suppression. They were preparing for a full takeover. "How long?" Miller asked. "Based on these protocols, 3 months, maximum," Thompson replied. "They're already positioning fleet elements under the guise of cultural exchange." Miller's jaw tightened. "Dr. Foster, status of the Odysseus virus." "Nearly ready," Foster said, bringing up new displays. "We've mapped 80% of their quantum frequency patterns. The virus can propagate through their network, but we need direct access to a primary hub for initial insertion. Which means we need an excuse to get close to their command and control centers," Jackson added. "Something big enough to justify bringing a primitive ship into their core systems." Miller studied the tactical display, watching the movement of Zarkak ships throughout human space. Each passing day brought more of their vessels, more cultural advisors, more suppression of human potential. Then we give them something they can't ignore, she said finally. Lieutenant Jackson, prepare a catastrophic reactor failure simulation. Make it convincing enough that they'll have to let us dock at a primary maintenance facility. As her crew moved to execute their orders, Miller allowed herself a grim smile. The Zarkaks thought they were watching humanity's slow surrender. Instead, they were witnessing the most elaborate trap in military history being built right under their crystalline noses. The message arrived at midnight ship's time. The U.S. Constellation, another obsolete human vessel, had been demolished by Zarkak's authorities for safety violations. Commander Miller watched the footage in the war room, her hands clenched into fists as the crystalline demolition ships tore apart the human craft. That's the third this week, Lieutenant Jackson said quietly. They're not even pretending anymore. The door chimed, admitting Michael Thompson and Dr. Foster. Their expressions told Miller they hadn't slept either. We intercepted their next target list, Thompson reported, his voice heavy. The Tenacity is scheduled for safety decommissioning in 72 hours. Miller activated the secure holotank, displaying their current position relative to the Empire's primary network hub. Then we're out of time. Dr. Foster, status of the Odysseus virus. Ready for deployment. Foster replied, bringing up the complex quantum calculations. But we need direct access to their primary hub. A secondary node won't be enough. The virus needs to spread through their entire synchronized network simultaneously. Jackson studied the tactical display. Their closest primary hub is in the Centauri sector. Even at maximum speed, we'd never make it before our decommissioning deadline. We're not going to Centauri, Miller said, her eyes fixed on a different point on the map. We're going straight for the heart, their capital system. The room fell silent. The capital system, Zarkaction Prime, housed the Empire's central command node and the heaviest defenses in known space. Commander, Jackson started, their security protocols are designed to stop threats they recognize. Miller interrupted, not a ship they've already dismissed as harmless. She manipulated the display, highlighting patrol routes and security checkpoints. We've spent months convincing them we're barely capable of interstellar flight. Now we use that. Thompson's eyes widened as he caught on. The decommissioning order. If we appear to suffer a critical system failure while en route to the demolition yard, they'd have to grant us emergency docking at the nearest facility, Foster finished. And with our reputation, they'll be expecting us to bungle our way into a disaster, Miller nodded. So we give them exactly what they're waiting for. Something spectacular enough to justify emergency protocols, but not so catastrophic that they'd destroy us outright. The team spent the next hour planning their manufactured catastrophe. Every detail had to be perfect. Too little damage would fail to justify emergency docking. Too much would make them a safety hazard to be destroyed on site. We'll have one chance, Foster warned, displaying the virus's deployment parameters. Once we begin uploading to their network, we'll have maybe 3 minutes before their automated security systems detect the intrusion. They won't be looking for an intrusion from us, Miller reminded her. Their own prejudice means their security protocols barely register human ships as technological entities. Jackson pulled up the Tenacity's true specifications, hidden beneath layers of holographic camouflage. We'll need to maintain our disguise even during the upload. The moment they realize our true capabilities. By then it'll be too late, Thompson said. The virus will already be spreading through their quantum frequencies. Miller studied her crew, the best of humanity, hidden behind carefully crafted masks of incompetence. For months they'd played the part of struggling primitives, swallowing their pride as the Zarkaks systematically dismantled human independence. Send word to command, she ordered. Operation Wooden Horse enters final phase in 48 hours. Tell the fleet to be ready. As her crew moved to their stations, Miller took a final look at the footage of the Constellation's destruction. The Zarkaks had made a critical mistake. They'd assumed technological superiority meant absolute superiority. They'd forgotten that humanity's greatest weapon had always been its ability to adapt, to deceive, to turn an enemy's strength into a weakness. In 2 days, they would remind the Empire why underestimating humanity was a mistake that echoed through history. Let them laugh at the primitive warship limping toward their demolition yards. Let them mock the outdated technology and struggling crew. The ancient Greeks had built a wooden horse. The U.S. tenacity would be humanity's digital echo of that legendary deception, and like its predecessor, it carried warriors ready to strike from within the heart of an empire drunk on its own supremacy. The U.S. tenacity dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a spectacular display of plasma venting and emergency lighting. Warning beacons flashed erratically as the ship tumbled toward the heart of the Zarkak's capital system, trailing debris and radiation warnings in its wake. Mayday, Mayday. Commander Miller broadcast on all frequencies, letting real tension seep into her voice. This is U.S. tenacity requesting emergency assistance. Main reactor approaching critical failure. Lieutenant Jackson's voice crackled through their comm system, artfully degraded to sound like failing equipment. Commander, containment field at 30%. We can't hold it much longer. On the bridge's hidden displays, Miller watched as nearby Zarkak's vessels reacted exactly as predicted. Their crystalline forms sparkled in the light of the tenacity's failing systems as they moved to intercept. Primitive human vessel, the capital's traffic control responded, their tone a mixture of amusement and annoyance. Maintain current trajectory. Emergency crews are en route to prevent your incompetence from damaging our orbital installations. Below decks, Dr. Foster and Michael Thompson worked with precision behind the holographic walls of engineering. The quantum virus waited in the ship's masked processors, ready to exploit the Empire's synchronized network. Their emergency teams are preparing to board, Thompson reported through the neural link. Reading standard diagnostic equipment. Perfect. They're bringing exactly what we need. Miller kept her expression panicked as the massive form of the capital's primary docking station filled their view screen. Engineering, status of containment field. Below 20%. Jackson shouted for the benefit of their audience. We're looking at total systems failure in 10 minutes. The Zarkak's response was swift. Tractor beams locked onto the tenacity, guiding it into a quarantine dock. Miller could practically feel the aliens' contempt as they watched the primitive vessel struggle. Prepare for emergency boarding, the station controller announced. Really, humans, nuclear power. It's remarkable you've made it this far without destroying yourselves. The first Zarkak's engineering team breached the airlock exactly 6 minutes later. Their crystalline environment suits sparkled under the emergency lighting as they rushed toward engineering, carrying sophisticated diagnostic tools that would connect directly to their primary network. Please, Miller begged, playing her role perfectly. You have to help us stabilize the reactor. We don't understand what went wrong. The lead engineer's mandibles clicked in what she now recognized as their equivalent of an eye roll. Stand aside, primitives. Let us show you how real technology works. As the alien team connected their diagnostic tools to the tenacity's failing systems, Foster's voice whispered through the neural link. Virus deployment beginning. 3 minutes until they might detect the intrusion. Miller watched the hidden countdown as the Zarkak's engineers worked, completely unaware that their own diagnostic equipment was serving as the perfect delivery system for humanity's digital weapon. Such crude technology, the lead engineer muttered, mandibles clicking rapidly. It's like trying to repair a child's toy. How do you even manage interstellar travel with these systems? We do our best, Miller replied humbly, noting that the virus upload had reached 40%. Your expertise is greatly appreciated. The engineer's crystalline head tilted in smug satisfaction. Perhaps after this, your species will finally accept proper oversight of your technological development. These independent ventures clearly demonstrate your need for guidance. 60%. Foster's voice was tense in the neural link. They're starting deeper system scans. The camouflage is holding, but barely. Oh my, another engineer chittered, studying their readings. Their containment protocols are absolutely primitive. Look at these power fluctuations. It's amazing they haven't vaporized themselves. 80%. Jackson kept them distracted with a series of perfectly timed system fluctuations, each one giving the aliens something new to mock. Upload complete, Foster announced just as the lead engineer was delivering a patronizing lecture about basic power management. Miller allowed herself a moment of silent satisfaction. The Trojan horse was inside the walls. Now they just had to wait for the signal to spring their trap. Thank you, she told the Zarkax team with genuine gratitude, though not for the reasons they assumed. You've saved our ship. Of course we did, the lead engineer preened. Now, about scheduling your proper decommissioning. Miller smiled politely, knowing that very soon, the Empire would learn the true meaning of technological superiority and the danger of underestimating those they considered beneath them. Michael Thompson's voice cut through the neural link. 3, 2, 1. Execute. The Odysseus virus activated simultaneously across every quantum-synchronized network in the Zarkax Empire. For a fraction of a second, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like dominoes falling in perfect sequence, the carefully orchestrated chaos began. On the Tenacity's bridge, Commander Miller watched as confusion spread through the capital's defense grid. Warning lights flashed across Zarkax control stations as their synchronized systems began to fail. What's happening? The lead engineer demanded, his crystalline form vibrating with agitation. These malfunctions are impossible. Are they? Miller asked, dropping the subservient act. Computer, disengage holographic camouflage. Authorization. Odysseus Prime. The Tenacity's transformation was breathtaking. Decades of carefully crafted deterioration melted away in seconds. Rust patches vanished, revealing gleaming quantum sensors. Flickering lights stabilized into advanced holographic displays. The primitive nuclear reactor readings transformed into a power signature that made the Zarkax engineers stumble backward in shock. Impossible, the lead engineer whispered. Your technology. You couldn't possibly. Couldn't we? Miller's voice was steel. Lieutenant Jackson, status report. Their defense grid is collapsing exactly as planned, Jackson reported, no longer hiding his expertise. The virus is spreading through their quantum frequencies at exponential rates. Estimated total system failure in 3 minutes. Through the viewport, Miller watched as the capital's supposedly impregnable defenses began to shut down. Shield generators failed. Weapon systems went dark. Communication arrays dissolved into quantum static. Dr. Foster, signal the fleet. Foster's hands danced across now revealed quantum interfaces. Message away. Earth's forces are moving into position. The Zarkax engineers tried to flee, but found themselves contained by force fields they hadn't known the Tenacity possessed. Their mandibles clicked in frantic patterns as they watched their empire's technology turn against them. How? The lead engineer demanded. We monitored your development. We controlled your technology. We made sure you couldn't advance beyond our parameters. Miller stepped closer, her voice cold. You monitored what we wanted you to see. You controlled what we allowed you to control. And while you were congratulating yourselves on keeping us primitive, we were learning every detail of your network. Thompson's voice carried satisfaction. Their quantum synchronization is completely compromised. Every system that's sensed to their central pulse is now under our control. Through the massive station windows, the first human warships began appearing. Not decrepit vessels held together by hope and rust, but advanced ships that had hidden their true nature just as the Tenacity had. The Zarkax capital's defenses, crippled by their own synchronized network, could only watch. You should have looked closer, Miller told the shocked engineers. You should have wondered why we accepted your contempt so easily. Instead, you let your arrogance blind you. You believed so completely in your superiority that you never questioned why we didn't fight back. All enemy defense systems neutralized, Jackson reported. Their entire command and control structure is paralyzed. The Zarkak's engineers watched in horror as their supposedly invincible empire was systematically dismantled by the primitives they had mocked for so long. Their own security protocols, designed to be impenetrable, now served as highways for human control signals. "Send word to the Emperor," Miller ordered. "Tell him humanity is ready to negotiate. This time, as equals." As Earth's fleet moved into position around the capital, Miller allowed herself a moment to appreciate the poetry of it all. The Zarkaks had believed so completely in their technological superiority that they had forgotten the most fundamental lesson of history. Never underestimate an enemy's capacity to innovate, to adapt, and to deceive. The primitive warship they had laughed at for so long had become the instrument of their downfall. Their own prejudice had been the perfect camouflage, their arrogance the key to their defeat. The house of cards was falling, wrought down not by brute force, but by patience, cunning, and the fatal mistake of believing that technological advancement always equated to superiority. The crystalline spires of the Imperial Palace reflected the rising sun of Zarkakshan Prime as Commander Miller strode up its steps. The once proud seat of empire now stood surrounded by Earth's primitive warships, their true capabilities finally unveiled. Inside the grand audience chamber, the Zarkak's Emperor's crystalline form seemed diminished, his usual radiant glow subdued. His advisors huddled nearby, mandibles clicking in distressed patterns as they watched the human delegation approach. "Impossible," the Emperor muttered, his translator barely catching the words. "We controlled every aspect of your development. We guided your technology. We monitored your progress." "You monitored what we wanted you to see," Miller replied, her voice carrying through the vast chamber. Lieutenant Jackson and Dr. Foster flanked her, no longer playing the roles of struggling technicians. "You were so convinced of your superiority that you never questioned why we accepted your guidance so easily." Michael Thompson stepped forward, activating a holographic display that showed the Empire's fallen defense network. "Your own synchronized quantum network became your greatest weakness. Every system, every ship, every defense platform, all connected, all vulnerable to the same attack." The Emperor's crystalline surface flickered in what Miller had learned was their expression of profound distress. "But our technological advantage, our superior understanding." "Superior." Foster's voice was sharp. "You believed so completely in your advancement that you forgot the most basic principle of warfare. Never underestimate your enemy." Miller gestured, and Thompson displayed another hologram, the U.S. Tenacity's true specifications. The assembled Zarkak's council recoiled as they saw the level of technology their primitive observers had actually achieved. "While you were congratulating yourselves on keeping us contained," Miller continued, "we were studying every aspect of your empire. Your networks, your protocols, your weaknesses. The more you dismissed us, the more freedom we had to work unnoticed." "Your own prejudice blinded you," Jackson added. "You were so busy looking for threats that matched your expectations that you missed the real danger right in front of you." The Emperor rose from his throne, his massive form towering over the human delegation. "You deceived us," he accused. "We survived," Miller corrected. "When we realized you were actively suppressing our development, we adapted. When you tried to control our progress, we learned to hide it. You forced us to become masters of deception, and then made the mistake of believing your own propaganda." Foster activated another display, showing the Tenacity's transformation from apparent wreck to advanced warship. "Every insult you hurled at our primitive technology, every patronizing inspection, every dismissive report, they all helped us perfect our camouflage." "The terms of surrender are simple," Miller stated, her voice firm. "The systematic suppression of human technology ends now. The cultural integration program will be dismantled. Earth and her colonies will be recognized as a fully sovereign entity. And if we refuse..." The Emperor's voice carried a hint of his old arrogance. Thompson smiled coldly and activated one final display, showing every Zarkak's military installation now under human control. Your entire defense network still runs through our virus. Right now, we control every weapons platform, every shield generator, every crucial system in your empire. Would you like a demonstration? The Emperor's glow faded further as the reality of his situation sank in. His empire, built on technological superiority and maintained through careful suppression of lesser species, had been undone by the very people he dismissed as primitives. The choice is yours, Miller concluded. But remember, the next time you look at a primitive species and see only what you expect to see, think of this moment. Think of how your own prejudice became your downfall. The Emperor sank back onto his throne, his crystalline form dulled with defeat. We accept your terms. As Miller began outlining the detailed surrender conditions, she caught a glimpse of the tenacity through the palace's massive windows. The warship hung in orbit above the capital, its true power finally unveiled for all to see. It had been humanity's greatest deception, a wolf in sheep's clothing that had walked straight into the heart of an empire. The Zarkaks had built their power on technological supremacy, believing it made them invincible. They'd forgotten that true strength lies not in the weapons you possess, but in the wisdom to know when to show them, and when to keep them hidden, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.